Fortunately, some are born with spiritual immune systems that sooner or later give rejection to the illusory worldview grafted upon them from birth through social conditioning. They begin sensing that something is amiss and start looking for answers. Inner knowledge and anomalous outer experiences show them a side of reality others are oblivious to, and so begins their journey of awakening. Each step of the journey is made by following the heart instead of following the crowd, and by choosing knowledge over the veils of ignorance, and thus begins their journey of illuminating the darkness.
All information presented in this podcast is solely for entertainment purposes and is not the opinions of the producers. As always, no copyright infringement is intended. Welcome back to Illuminated Darkness. So, in our last episode, we took a look at the pyramids and answered some questions and asked a whole lot more questions and left some questions unanswered. So, today, we're going to take a look at the Great Sphinx of Giza. One thing I'd like to point out is that megaliths on Earth seem to be related to each other, often built along a grid composed of two pentagrams, one's upright and one's inverted, within the circle of the equator. All of the monuments fall into place along this grid. If one pentagram is anchored at Giza and one at the prime meridian 0 longitude, too many major architectural structures exist along this dual pentagram design for it to be mere coincidence. This design predicts where the next megalithic structures will be found as well. Modern humans appeared about 200,000 years ago, but record keeping did not begin until about 5,500 years ago. It means about 97% of human history is lost. History tells us that humans' pre-primitive achievements were not technically advanced, but the megaliths and artifacts and thought processes, as best can be determined, that appear strangely out of sync with what was achieved by our ancient ancestors. There's an ancient construction that indicates a pre-10,000 society with an interesting and out-of-sync mindset just before the Sumerian societies appeared, from which we have records and evidence. So, 97% of our history missing. That leaves a lot of blanks and a lot of unanswered questions. Now here's something interesting. A wobble of the Earth's axis causes the Sahara to cycle between desert and grassland every 23,000 years. So is it possible that at one point Egypt was a lush rainforest? We'll find out. Now, according to Greek mythology, the Sphinx sat outside Thebes and asked a riddle to all travelers who passed by. If the traveler failed to solve the riddle, the Sphinx would kill them. If the traveler answered the riddle correctly, the Sphinx would destroy herself. The riddle was, what goes on 4 feet in the morning, 2 feet at noon, and 3 feet in the evening? Any guesses? No? Well, the answer is man. 4 feet in the morning, childhood. 2 feet in the afternoon, adulthood. 3 feet in the evening, senior citizen. Pretty neat, huh? Now, the origins of the Sphinx is unknown. It shows erosion that's pre-10,000 BC. Now, Egypt in 1925, only the head was visible. Only the head was visible. The body was buried under the sand. 11 years later, in 1936, the entire Sphinx was uncovered. It is the largest monument on Earth, and the Sphinx faces east towards the rising sun. It sits halfway from the Great Pyramids of Giza. The Sphinx is over 60 feet tall and over 240 feet long, and was carved from one single piece of limestone. Now, what is its purpose? The Sphinx is one of the most studied monuments in the world and the most mysterious. And just like the pyramids, the builders left behind no inscriptions to indicate who built it, or why it was built, or when it was built. For years, Egyptologists and archaeologists have thought the Great Sphinx of Giza to be about 4,500 years old, dating back to around 2,500 BC. But that number is just that. It's a belief, it's a theory, it's not a fact. Robert Bivol says in The Age of the Sphinx, there were no inscriptions, not a single one, either carved on a wall or a stela, or written among the throngs of papyri that associates the Sphinx with the time. So when was it built? Now, according to two Ukrainian scientists, the Sphinx was built more than 800,000 years ago, and they say there's true geological evidence to support this fact. Now, as I said, most Egyptologists date the Sphinx back to 2500 BC, and that's the time of Pharaoh Khafre. This date is based on the stone tablet, or the stele, that is located between the paws of the Sphinx that mentions the pharaoh. The tablet's known as the Dream Stela, and the tablet also tells of a pharaoh that came 1,000 years later, which is Thutmose IV. Now, we've talked about Thutmose III, his father, in another episode, and we'll talk about Thutmose III more in a later episode. King Thutmose IV is believed to be a new kingdom, which is believed to have been about 1,000 years after the Sphinx was sculpted. Now, according to legend, before becoming king, Thutmose IV was on an expedition to Giza, and he slept next to the Sphinx. At the time, according to the story, the Sphinx was covered in sand all the way up to its head. In his dream, the Sphinx came to Thutmose and told him if he would uncover the Sphinx, he would become pharaoh. Now, while Thutmose was already the son of the king Thutmose III, he was not the royal heir. The Sphinx, they say, only speaks to Pharaoh. The Sphinx told the king in his dream, "Everything the eye of the Lord illuminates will be his." Thutmose cleared the sand, and the Sphinx kept its promise. Now, what is the eye of the Lord? And to answer that, we have to look at the Dream Stela. Could the flashing eye of the Lord be the Aten disk? Okay, well, what is the Aten disk? The Aten disk, simply put, is the sun. According to some, there's a line on the stela that reads, "I have been since the first time." According to ancient astronaut theorists, this refers to when Osiris came, or the beginning of civilization. Now, they say Zet Tepe, and this is the golden age of Egypt, and it's estimated to have been about 12,500 years ago, which is about 8,000 years prior to the accepted chronological history of Egypt. So, with that being said, and going back to, 97% of human history being lost and not recorded, it is possible that there was a civilization there prior to that carved the Sphinx and moved on, died out, became extinct, or if you base it on the fact of the Earth's alleged wobble on its axis that causes the Sahara to alternate between this lush, life-sustaining, life-giving rainforest to this dry, arid desert, it's possible that when the wobble occurred and the drought hit, they just moved on, or they died out and became extinct. We may never know. A geological record of the Giza Plateau shows weathering patterns not consistent with weather conditions for the area for the past 5,000 years. Now, it's important to note that in 1991, geologists from Boston University found erosion and evidence of weather patterns that show the Sphinx was constructed thousands of years before the existence of Egyptian culture. There is rounded or a rolling profile of the rock, which is caused by rain beating down on the rock and water running over the rock. So it's possible that there was significant rainfall on the Giza Plateau that would have dated back before 3000 BC, at least 500 years before the suspected construction of the monolith. The degree of erosion of the statue goes back thousands of years, so roughly 5,000 to 10,000 BC. But that still doesn't answer the question, who or what built the Sphinx? So let's look at its most prominent feature, and that's the face of the Sphinx. And missing from the face of the Great Sphinx is most notably its nose. But it's also missing its beard. Some believe that the French Emperor Napoleon is responsible for the missing facial feature. In actuality, a Muslim ruler in the Middle Ages decided that the Great Sphinx represented a guardian of the underworld or a type of demon and was dangerous. It was believed that the Sphinx was a dark god, and as a result, the statue was vandalized. Archaeological excavations in the early 19th century found pieces of its carved stone beard and a royal cobra emblem from its headdress. Residues of red pigment are also still visible on the face, leading researchers to conclude that at some point the Sphinx's entire visage was painted red. Now, it's still under debate as to whose face is on the Sphinx. Some believe it to be King Khafre, which was a pharaoh. Ancient astronaut theorists say that the head of the Sphinx is not proportionate to the body of the Sphinx. And this is clearly noticeable in photographs of the Sphinx. So it asks the question, is it possible that the head was reshaped or recarved at a later time? That being said, what was the head originally? Could it have been the head of a lion? With the amount of the astrological knowledge possessed by the ancient Egyptians, could the Great Sphinx be a representation of the constellation Leo? Now, there's no mention of the Sphinx or a lion in the Old Kingdom text, so the body may not have been carved to look like a lion at all, but it may have been carved to look like a dog. And that could be a representation of the Egyptian god Anubis. So, what the head could have been was a carving of the Anubis head on the Sphinx. So there's another potential explanation as to why the head looks so disproportionate to the rest of the body. It's another question that seems to have no answer. Now, psychic healer Edgar Cayce claimed he had been a high priest in a past life in ancient Egypt and was directly associated with the building of the Sphinx. In his records and recordings, Cayce stated that the Sphinx and the pyramids have been built in approximately 10,490 BC. Now, many believe that Cayce's readings are accurate and that Cayce's proposed dates of construction are also accurate. Now, until his death in 1945, Edgar Cayce gave several readings about the Sphinx. The readings claim that the Sphinx is directly related to another ancient civilization that many believe may have once existed, and that's the lost city of Atlantis. Plato described that Atlantis existed at the same time ancient Egypt was experiencing its Zet-Tepe, or its golden age. Cayce said that he saw in his dreams that under the right paw of the Sphinx was a chamber or a hall of records from the lost civilization of Atlantis. So could it be that the Sphinx was the keeper of the records? Now, the Edgar Cayce Foundation was permitted to attempt to search for the Hall of Records. After 8 hours of drilling holes under the Sphinx, they were stopped by the Egyptian government. This begs the question, why? Were they getting too close to the chamber? Was it something else? Or is it possible that just the Egyptian government felt they were going to poke or drill so many holes in the bedrock under the Sphinx that it could cause later irreparable damage to the Sphinx? And there again, it's another one of those questions surrounding the Sphinx that we simply do not have answers to. So here's the big question. What lies beneath the Sphinx? It's believed that King Hermes was buried in the Sphinx. Now, legend has it that there is a maze below the paws of the Sphinx that leads to the mystery-shrouded Hall of Records, where all essential knowledge of alchemy, astronomy, mathematics, magic, and medicine are stored. The Library of Knowledge, the researchers continue to look for it today, so like the library at Alexandria. Another question that has been asked is, are there any secret passages under the Sphinx? The Sphinx is home to a number of tunnels and passages. Some were created by treasure hunters, others by people recarving the Sphinx, and others just have no known origin. Now, there's a shaft, allegedly, at the top of the Sphinx head. There are even reportedly access tunnels to some large natural caves directly under the Sphinx. A sketch of the Sphinx depicts a man being pulled out of the hole in the Sphinx's head. Vivant Demon made this sketch of the Sphinx in 1798. And although he didn't replicate it perfectly, he must have known there was a hole in the top of its head, since he sketched the image of someone being pulled out. Another big question that has been asked is it possible that there's a second Sphinx buried on the Giza complex? Now, on the dream stela between the paws of the Sphinx, it shows not one but two Sphinx, one that faces east and one that faces west. Archaeologists in Egypt have unearthed the remains of two large sphinxes at an ancient temple in Luxor. And according to a study which was published in 2007 by Egyptologist Bassam El-Shama said the famed half-lion, half-man statue was an Egyptian deity which had been erected next to another sphinx which has since vanished without a trace. So here's the big question. Where the hell did it go? Something that damn big? How the hell you gonna lose it? It's a cat. It might have just got up and walked away. Ancient Egyptian history and study of archaeological evidence indicate that there were two sphinxes on the plateau near the pyramid. Not only did the ancient Egyptians mention a second sphinx, but so did the Greeks, the Romans, the Muslims, and it is said to have been destroyed between 1000 and 1200 AD. Now, Greek mythology has its own sphinx, and this was a treacherous and a merciless being with the head of a woman, the haunches of a lion, and the wings of a bird. And according to Greek mythology, she challenges those who encounter her to answer a riddle and kills and eats them if they fail to do so. So Greek mythology and Egyptian mythology are both kind of lining up here. So it makes you question, did they all start from one society and kind of branch off like a big family tree? With its lion's head and a human body, the Great Sphinx represents Ra-Horkafe, a form of the powerful sun god, and its royal incarnation of royal power and protector of the temple doors. Accounts exist of the Sphinx as an oracle, as a king's burial chamber, and a temple for the initiation into the Hermetic mysteries. Egyptologists have argued for decades whether there are secret chambers under the Sphinx, why the head-to-body ratio is out of proportion, and whose face adorns it. So even people who study this have no clue. In ancient Egypt, the Sphinx was a spiritual guardian, most often depicted as a male with a pharaoh's headdress, as is the Great Sphinx, and figures of the creatures were often included in tombs and temple complexes. Now, for the Egyptians, the Sphinx was a protector built to guard royalty, and it was often at royal burials and temple entrances, and it was associated again with the hawk-headed sun god Ra, and as such it was a creature of God. And as we said, the most common and accepted theory about the Great Sphinx suggests that the statue was erected for the pharaoh Khafre about 2603 to 2578 BC. So it is by far the largest statue that has survived from the ancient world. The Great Sphinx of Giza has been perplexing archaeologists for many years. Now, the Sphinx was only rediscovered in 1905. Before that, it was covered in sand, and we have no way of knowing what its creators called it simply because there are no records left behind. When Napoleon came to Egypt, the Sphinx was buried up to its neck in sand, and it wasn't until between 1925 and 1936 that a French engineer was successful in clearing the sand away to reveal the base of the Sphinx. So for thousands of years, this thing is buried up to its shoulders in sand, which created just this great big disembodied head sticking out at the eastern edge of the Sahara. And then in 1817, a Italian adventurer, Captain Giovanni Battista Cargivia, led 160 men to the first modern attempt to dig out the Sphinx. Now, here's something for you. The Sphinx is so old that its first restoration dates all the way back to 1400 BC, when it was already 1,000 years old. So, if at that 1400 years before Christ, this thing is already 1,000 years old. So where did it come from? Who built it? Is still the question we constantly ask. It's weird. If the Sphinx once had the head of Anubis and is placed as a guardian of the tombs and temples, what is it guarding? Now, Anubis is the Egyptian god of funerary rites, protector of the graves, and guides the dead to the underworld. He's also the guardian of the sacred necropolis, and Giza is considered a sacred necropolis. Now, ancient texts talk about Anubis frequently, and he's very prominently featured in Egyptian art. Ancient astronaut theorists that Anubis visited our world in the past during Zet-Tepi, or the Golden Age. Now, with that being said, is it possible that the first pharaohs discovered the Sphinx rather than carving it? Is it also possible that the Great Sphinx and the Great Pyramids were designed to function together? So, if the Sphinx, again, is functioning as a guardian and was placed on an exact spot, then what is it exactly guarding? Now, 200 feet from the Sphinx, there is a causeway connecting the second pyramid to its temple. And recently, there was discovered what is suspected to be a ceremonial burial chamber of the god Osiris. Now, Osiris is the Egyptian god of the deceased. Now, this Osiris shaft was first unearthed in 1934, but they didn't really explore it until 1999. The shaft consists of 3 separate shafts, descends into 3 separate chambers, and the final chamber is buried nearly 10 stories underground, and it contains what some say is the sarcophagus of Osiris. Now, the sarcophagus is underwater, which, how in the hell did it end up underwater in a frickin' desert? Good question. And it's much larger than its lid. They say there were once pillars at each of the corners, and the hieroglyphics translated to God Osiris, God of the underground. Now, most scholars believe that Osiris is a myth and his tomb to be ceremonial. If we go back to the ancient astronaut theorists, they believe that the sarcophagus in the tomb is proof of extraterrestrial intervention on Earth, and that Osiris was real. He was one of the Sumerian sky gods, and we're going to get into those a little in a later episode. So, we said the Sphinx is perhaps a gateway to something. So sarcophagus means flesh eater. That's what the rough translation is. A body of flesh and blood goes into the sarcophagus consumes it. So an empty sarcophagus would suggest teleportation or transmutation of the body. This possibly suggests that who or whatever built the sarcophagus, the chambers, and the shaft may have actually been building what they felt was a portal to move between worlds and realities. If we look at, the ancient alien theory and the ancient alien technologies, this could have been a form of that advanced technology. So is it possible that the Sphinx may represent a gate to the next world? Pretty interesting question. Now, for another big question, how long did it actually take to build the Sphinx? The positioning of the Great Sphinx is in such a way that it faces east where the sun rises. Now, according to research led by Mark Lerner, the construction of the Great Sphinx would have taken approximately 3 years to finish with 100 workers steadfast on the job. Because, as we learned in the beginning, the entire statue is built from a single huge rock of limestone. So you would have your stonecutters, masons, whatever you want to call them, chipping away at this, 24 hours a day. You'd have to run 3 shifts to finish it in this time frame. They say the pyramids were finished in 25 years, and like we saw in our last episode, a block would have to be quarried, transported, and set every 2 minutes to meet that guideline. So, if it's possible, okay, great. But from where I'm sitting and from what I've seen, it's not possible. It's not humanly possible. There was some kind of advanced technological intervention there. So, but that's just me. So now let's take a look at the Martian connection. As with the pyramids, ancient astronaut theorists believe that there are remains of an ancient sphinx on Mars. Okay, alright. This is based on images from the Mars Pathfinder probe. Now, some propose that there's a mirror image of the Giza Plateau on Mars, based on the Pathfinder images and images from Viking 1 and 2. So this adds to the theory that there was once a technologically advanced, intelligent life on Mars. And could this be some ancient advanced civilization? And could this civilization had seen their planet was dying, they escaped to Earth, with whence their atmosphere and their water vanished from Mars, they recreated their monolithic monuments on their new home planet. NASA's sole mission to Mars is to focus on finding evidence of past life on Mars. So, possible, maybe. I look at the pictures and I'm, no geologist or anything like that. I see a bunch of rocks sitting there in the desert or on a dead planet or whatever. So now we look at the controversy of the Great Sphinx and the Sphinx water erosion hypothesis, and it's considered to be a fringe claim, and it contends that the Great Sphinx of Giza and its enclosing walls eroded primarily due to ancient rainfalls or floods, attributing their creation to Plato's lost Atlantis over 11,500 years ago. It is possible that over 12,000 years ago, Egypt wasn't dry, that it was a rainforest with regular rainfall, streams, lakes, etc. And it's also possible that a civilization existed in that rainforest and thrived, and this civilization had the knowledge and the tools to carve this monolithic statue in their quarry. Now, some say that the watermarks on the Sphinx are due to the Sphinx lying closely above the Nile aquifer, And the capillary action moves water to the surface of the stone. During this process, the salt contained in the limestone dissolves and is drawn to the surface where it crystallizes, and the expanding crystals cause fine layers to flake off. And that, is their answer to it. So this raises the question of erosion on the Great Sphinx. Could it be from the desert sands blowing across it for thousands of years and they've just misinterpreted the water damage? I mean, doctors make mistakes, lawyers make mistakes. I can see a geologist make a mistake. Hell, historians make mistakes. So I can see a geologist making a mistake. But is it possible that rain once fell on the Sahara? Who knows? I don't know. You don't know. We may never know, because there again, like with the pyramids, there are no written records of the designing or the building of the Sphinx. It's just poof, it's there. Okay, who fucking put it there? That is my question. How did it get there? Who put it there? Who? That's what I want to know. Who put it there? So the question still remains. Like the Great Pyramids, we have no writings, no drawings, no plans left behind to explain who or what it was built for. We just have theory. We have assumptions. We have guesses. Is the Sphinx guarding this secret hall of records, this immense library of knowledge? Is it there to guard and protect the graves and the spirits of the great pharaohs of Egypt? Or could it be that the Sphinx is keeping secrets that we're not supposed to know yet, or that we are never meant to know, or that we are not yet ready to know? We are not mentally, spiritually, technologically ready to know these secrets. And that is the biggest question that I can find no answer to. Is that what is the Sphinx guarding out there in that desert? Is it there to protect the pyramids and the tombs of the pharaohs? What is its purpose? Because the Sphinx isn't telling. Our ancestors don't tell. The ancients will tell. So only the great gods of Egypt know why the Sphinx is there and how it got there. And only its creator knows what compelled him to design and build the oldest and the biggest historical landmark on Earth. That's all we have for today, kids. This one was a fun one to research, and I look forward to the next topic, which I hope will be just as interesting and mysterious and as fun as this one. I've had a great time on this trip to ancient Egypt. So until we meet again, friends, keep your eyes and your minds open, and as always, try to stay out of the darkness.